Welcome to another exciting episode of Into Your Life podcast. Today's guest is someone I've met many years ago back in Cambridge. And she actually used to be my gym teacher. She used to teach me and make me move my body and go to gym and do some hard exercises. She used to run a boot camp back in Cambridge. And I stayed in touch with Charlie since then, followed her journey, and wow, that has been a journey. So today's guest is Charli Wall. She's Rewilding guide, feminine embodiment coach, and a wise woman. There is so much to her journey. There's just one sentence in her bio that really just struck me as a summary of what we might get into in this conversation. She traveled extensively and trained as a yoga teacher in India. She went wild in Spain, lived off the land, and learned about the role nature plays in our happiness. And I was like, that's so beautiful. I'm so thrilled to have Charlie here and have a chat and learn more about, exactly what it is that she's been up to, what she learned from all her experiences, and what she has to say. So, without any further ado, hi, Charlie. Welcome.
Hello, it's so lovely to be here. Thank you for that. Thank you for that intro. It's always really interesting, isn't it, when you hear your own story reflected back to you.
So, is there something more in your story that you would like our listeners to know as a point of reference to kind of lead us into what we might get to talk about today?
Oh my goodness. I don't know where to start really. Um, gosh. So my story, I guess, if I can just give you a brief synopsis, then it might help to frame my experience for your listeners. I suffered a tragic loss when I was 21, and that kind of pivoted my entire life. And from that experience of that loss, I've then sort of gone on and explored psychology and psychiatry and fitness and health and movement and intuition and feminine embodiment. And I've just been to so many places, but I did a lot of that. Like a lot of that started after the loss of my brother. My brother and father were in the same accident when I was 21. My brother was killed and my father was disabled. And I looked after my father until he died in 2016. Once he died, and I was still running the boot camp that Lenka was coming to. I think he was still coming at that point when my father died. At that point, I sort of sold everything. I sold my house, I sold the business that I'd worked so hard to build and built it from the dirt up. And I was just so amazed and grateful that it was a sellable business even. But that enabled me then to go on these adventures. My son had left home, he was 16, and my father had died. So it kind of, I went from, and this is, I think, there's a lot around identity here if you want to get into that. But, my identity as being a boot camp creatrix. So like I created female communities. So I had this huge female community in Cambridge. And so I was the owner of this business in Cambridge, and I was very well known for that. I was the mother of a son, a single mother of a son, one child, and the carer of my father. And all of that kind of over the space of a few months, and the owner of a house, and 3 cats. We have this sort of fixed identity. I was 44 at the time, I'm 52 now. And all of that was stripped away from me. And I think women can go through this sort of stripping of self very often, very commonly post-menopausal time. But for me, that I was still kind of in the menopause. But I think there's a sort of descent that happens for a feminine essence being. And I think it can happen at any age. I think it's more common post-menopause because very likely circumstances have led to children, if you've got children, have left home round about the same time. I often see relationships breaking down at the same time, or people just being worn out, overwhelmed, having worked long hours, etc., etc. So for me, that kind of happened organically, but very suddenly, all at the same time. Like I didn't know my son was going to leave home when he did. That's a whole other story. And so I was stripped bare with no grounding in things that I had held safe to me as part of my identity. And without all of those, well, the illusion of those things which kept me grounded, I I ended up going on this, journey into nature and my body in way more depth than I ever had done as a personal trainer. When I was a personal trainer, I hid. I used exercise as a coping mechanism, and I had a very dysfunctional relationship with my body and food. And there was a lot of shadow, there was a lot of masking in that life. And so I was stripped bare by the universe, and yet in that stripping, I found myself.
And I love that, we start talking about the self identity because this is such an interesting thing that we're now getting to explore more and more. We're discussing more and more is the labels, is the self identification, it's what we believe about ourselves and how that's really impacting our life and career and health and relationships. And in what you were saying and what I read from your bio, what I know about you, it is the fact, the realization for you that you now draw so heavily on, the realization that we have all the answers within. That yes, you can go on retreats and experiences, and you can get training, and you can learn so much more about psychology and spirituality, and you can do all those wonderful things, and they're awesome. But ultimately, the thing that we may need still a lot more of is the encouragement, it's the guidance, it's the support of finding the answers within.
Well, one of the, as you mentioned, when you were sort of reading my bio, one of the things I did after I sold everything, well, the first thing I did was I went to India to learn yoga for 5 weeks. And at the time, I had chronic post-traumatic stress disorder and chronic anxiety. And going to India was possibly one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life because of where I was in my physical and mental health state at that time. But the irony was, I was looking for this thing by going to India, and I'd heard it's inside you. And I was like, right, so if I can just go to India, then I'll find this thing that's inside of me, which, which of course didn't happen, because it was never, it always was inside of me, but it was I was never going to find it with the attachment to finding it when I was learning to do yoga. And it's that realization. Then I fell into a coaching course, a life coaching course that was run by a guy called Jamie Smart, who teaches a paradigm called the Three Principles. And I just fell into that again. Like there's been so many, I can say fluke, or I can say divine intervention. Like, for me, it was divine intervention. And, having been to India, going wild and rewilding in Spain, which was incredible. And I now run retreats with the guy that I did my own nature quest with. That's what I do, one of the retreats that I run. But even after all of that, still with the attachment to, I've got to find it. I've got to find this thing, whatever it is, and I'll find it here and I'll find it here. It wasn't until I did this coaching course again by Divine Intervention, because I had never heard of the 3 principles, that I suddenly saw the truth of that it's been inside of me the whole time. I just didn't know. I didn't know I was protected. I didn't know I was loved. I didn't know I was safe. I didn't know what I had going for me because of these false, like, I'm this, I'm a mum, I'm a daughter, I'm a carer, I'm a personal trainer, I'm a boot camp creator. When that was stripped from me, what was I left with? Who am I? And, you know, we'll happily say, like, I'm such and such, I'm this age, I'm a mother, I live here, you know, but that's not who we are. And until you can touch that possibility of something else more true, you're always going to be scrabbling around trying to find your grounding in things which are changeable. You know, all that stuff is changeable. Everything in the world of form is changeable, including thoughts, feelings, bodies, you know, all of that stuff. It's changeable. But what's true and unchangeable is what's in here. And that's been in here since I was born, when I first started to get a sense of there's a voice talking to me, right? There's always been wisdom there, and there's been, am I allowed to swear? I call it a little fucker. So there's a little fucker in there that gets louder and louder and louder the older you get. But there is a sort of softer, wiser knowing that if you can tune into that and follow that, you're not going to go wrong. And of course, I had the history of doing that with my life. You know, when I quit my addiction specialist job at Adam Brooks Hospital, I didn't know how to run a business. I just knew I couldn't do that anymore. I knew I couldn't do that anymore. And I followed it, and everyone thought I was mad. And maybe I was slightly unhinged at the time. Because had I not been, I'd have been worried about money and the mortgage and how I was going to blah, blah, blah. So these places of like trusting your knowing and tuning into that. And of course, it's the unknown. If I haven't got the stability of these illusory labels that I'm trying to get my security from, outside of that is where you'll actually find that. And that connection to self has been life-changing for me in every way that I can articulate. In my relationship with my son, I don't have my 3 cats anymore, but I do have 2 dogs. You know, in my work, in the lives that I still get to change. But it's more importantly for myself, outside of all of that, you know, outside success, it's my relationship to self. I'm not unhappy, and I used to be unhappy a lot. You wouldn't have known that at the boot camp, Lenka, but I was, because I hid it, you know.
I really appreciate and love how you've talked about this journey of losing almost that sense of self through, you know, carer for your father, homeowner, boot camp, create, I think you used the word create tricks, you know, all of this and essentially giving that up within a space of a few months and going to India. And you've explained it so nicely about how these identities, which we give to ourselves, we pick them up ourselves, and how they can actually hold us back, how they can tie us down, essentially. And I really appreciate how you explained that going to India to find that thing that was inside of you. The irony of that is you explained that so well. And sometimes we need to be reminded that it's inside of us. We just need that reminder, because we do get so bogged down by, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a carer, I'm a parent, I'm a CEO of a business, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a VA, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a car owner, I'm a homeowner, I rent, I'm a traveler. We pick up these labels that suit us, we think, and then we sit in them and sort of forget about the power within us to really step away from that, because being a daughter is not who I am, but it is a part of me, because I am a daughter, but it's not my full identity. And I think you've explained it really well, and thank you for that. It's sort of clears it up a bit and just gives us that reminder that, you know what, these labels are just almost like anchors. They just hold us down. Whereas the real power, the real I am, is within us and within ourselves, to find it and just embrace it and empower ourselves to step away from these external labels that make us feel safe and make us feel like we exist, whereas it's a way to hide. And like you said to Lenka, you were extremely unhappy, but you were able to hide it. You had these masks on. And with that, can you just share a little bit about how you experienced, going, and it was probably not a conscious experience when you got on that plane to go to India, that this was almost your start of a journey that you were going on. But looking back, can you sort of a little bit describe sort of what you were going through, sort of maybe some of the emotions that you were dealing with, and how you were finding your way? Because I know you said you fell into, through luck or divine intervention, the life coaching. And I think a lot of times we do fall into something and not necessarily know where it's going to lead. But you've got a nice way of looking back. Can you sort of just help our listeners who are maybe on their journey, or maybe in the middle of their journey, and not realizing that the turmoil or what you were experiencing might be something that they're going through, and just to help them keep on their track?
Yeah, of course, I'll do my best. Well, I was in, so picture the scene. 2016, my father's, so it's 2017 actually. My father died in October 2016. And so I'd been looking after him really from the age of 21. I'm 44 at this point. I've been running from my grief for 20 odd years. And when I was waiting in Heathrow Airport, I remember like the house had been sold. I packed it up. Zach had left so I went to India in the July. Or was it the June? I can't remember, one of those summer months. Zach had already left to go to Corfu and work in Corfu in April, just before my 44th birthday. And so I'd been packing up my house. My son wasn't there. My father was dead. And I didn't know who I was. Like, I just didn't know who I was. I was incredibly anxious, as I've said. I was having nightmares. I couldn't read anything. I couldn't visualize anything, because my nervous system had been so activated and charged for so many years that it was now like in chronic freeze. So sights, sounds, light, reading, listening, to radio, anything like that. I couldn't do anything. So I got on this plane, and I remember getting on the plane and I was shaking with fear. Like, I just didn't know what was coming. Of course, because it's the unknown. And again, I'm doing it from this perspective of, if I can just do this yoga course, then I can create this new life. I can have this new identity as a yoga teacher, because I didn't know what to do at this point. So there's huge attachment to an outcome, and this idea that if I go to India, I don't even know where this came from. If I go to India, I'll find this thing inside of myself, because India is supposed to be this spiritual place. So I'm still listening to outside people telling me where I can find this thing that's outside of me. So huge trepidation. The house is gone. Zach's gone. My dad's gone. And I mean, I don't know how to describe it really. Like the rug had been pulled out from under me. That's the only way I can describe it, because I didn't know the rug was inside of me. So my experience, which had been created through thought, was like heightened into this extreme version of 20, 30 years of grief and anxiety. And that was what it was like at Heathrow Airport. It was so charged in my system. But I did do it, and I got through it. I don't know how, but I did. And when I ended up, then I went to Spain next, and it was the complete opposite of India. So I went from one extreme to the other. So India was loud. I don't know if you've ever been, but it's super loud. They're beeping their horns. There's cows, there's monkeys, there's people, it's just super noisy. And then I went to Spain to do this Rewilding nature quest, which was silence and, learning about the land and understanding the language of the birds and the animals, and eating from the land and being on my own, which again was what I desperately craved. I just want to be on my own, and then on my own without my phone or anything. The first 2 days was very, very, very tough, because not only do we have these identifications with like, who am I? We have our like, oh, if I've just got my phone, or I've got my work to do, or I've got, whatever program I watch on the TV. But I didn't have any of that. I'd already stopped watching the TV because, as I said, I couldn't watch anything. So then I go from extreme noise to extreme silence. And when you're in extreme silence for the first time in your life, that's deafening. It's like, what do I do now? So over the 2 days, so I was there for a week. After those 2 days, I began to really settle in to like this space that I had been so used to filling with either drama, chaos, drink, work, more drama, podcasts, books, learning, just filling the space. And suddenly I had space. And as I kind of grew into that space, and I mean expanded into that space, allowed myself to be in that space and sit in the space of no thing, that is when it started to change. That is when it started. And I hadn't done the life coaching course at this point. But that is when I started to like settle into the possibility that there was something else available to me outside of my thought created version of self. And from there, I went to Greece for 3 weeks. But after that, I came across the life coaching course. And because I'd had an opening, because I'd had a space, because I couldn't watch the TV, because I couldn't listen to anything else, because I couldn't literally fill the space with anything, I started to listen to this course. I mean, I was a bit resistant at first, because being on the computer and listening to information I found very difficult. But they were saying something in a language I didn't understand, but I could feel something different. And because of that space that was, again, divine intervention presented to me, that I didn't try and fill, or I couldn't because I just couldn't. The relationship, the thread of that, like starting that relationship to something else, began to unfold piece by piece, inch by inch. And that started this relationship to trust. And that started this relationship to faith. And that started a deeper relationship to the wiser voice that was in my head that I was starting to tune into, that was outside of the shitty committee. And building on that and starting to learn more about what was inside helped me to ground in that thing which is unchangeable. I don't know if that's going to, like, I don't know if I'm articulating that in a way that's going to be helpful for your listeners if they're feeling so scattered and so, you know, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to feel scattered and depressed and upset and anxious and have suicidal ideation. Like, I understand the gravity and the desperation and the hopelessness. But if you can just get a sense of what's underneath that, you know, there will be a voice underneath that, a quiet, tiny whisper of something, even if you've just stumbled across this podcast, for example. You know, there's something behind you that's got your back that is invisible to you, that if you don't know it's there, again, you're scrapping around trying to fill the space, thinking you're broken, thinking you need fixing. But what you're looking for, you're looking with. You know, it's having the eyes to see that. And as I said, stumbling across a podcast like this, where you might hear something. There's a drip, there's a seed that grows if you water it. And that's the important thing. To know that you've got that, to know that something's got your back, to know that there's a different possibility. Your life isn't scripted. You might think it is, but it really isn't.
And I think what you said that really touched me is the fact that you have this knowing, and even if you don't understand it, even if you're trying to learn something or improve something or figure something out and you don't understand it rationally, then that's okay. Because I think we live still in a world that's very much rational, logical, prefrontal cortex. Let's figure out a way and let's educate ourselves and let's find a way to rationalize our experiences and explain. I think we all are seeking explanation and understanding that goes more through the rational path than tapping into the knowing that's more unexplainable. That's more we feel it, we sense it, we know it, but we can't necessarily explain it. And I think you were touching on it beautifully with there can be all sorts of a chaos happening, and there could be lots of voices, lots of anxiety, lots of things going on. But we all have this knowing, and we all have this voice, and we don't need to fully understand what it's saying or how we have it or that we have it, but to find ways to reconnect with it. And through your journey and your experiences, you're kind of giving people examples of what could lead to understanding the knowing. Like some people want to go on a retreat, some people want to go in nature, travel, connect with others, be silent. There are so many modalities, so many tools to allow ourselves that. But I think the thing I'm hearing from you, it's just the trusting, the knowing that the answers are already within, and not necessarily what we do. It's the important part, but it's just doing whatever and keep working on it. But if there's someone out there who is a bit more still like me and who's like, but I need some specific advice, I need something, this knowing, this thing, it's great, but where do I start? Like, am I just gonna I don't need to go, I don't want to go to India. I maybe don't want to go into nature.
I wouldn't recommend it.
I've been to India. India is great. It's definitely overwhelming, but it's definitely a specific kind of experience, and not everyone needs this type of a divine intervention. But can we look at some smaller daily little things that people can explore by themselves or within their local communities, rather than these big life changing, in air quotes, these kind of massive steps that cost lots of time and lots of money and lots of effort and are still unsure to bring us the results? And yet we can look closer to the home, closer to heart, I'm sure, to find some practices, exercises, experiences that can help us on this journey.
Yes, of course. But what I want to say about that is that if you're still looking through the lens of I need this to get that, you're still looking with the wrong eyes. I get it, I do. Now, part of what you're talking about and what I teach in terms of like that embodiment is devotion to self. Now, sometimes a woman will come to me and I can't even get her to do a face care routine. She might want to do it. I might tell her to do that as a tool, but to get her to do that is another different thing. So I don't know if you have men and women listening to your podcast. Yeah, okay. So honestly, to have a relationship to your nervous system or nervous system hygiene, let's say, we'll start there, being outside, looking at the sun in the morning and the evening, if you've got it. I haven't. But I do go out every morning early and every evening, and I look towards the sun, whether it's there or not, and I walk in nature, and I don't have my earbuds in, I just walk. Some people like to walk barefoot, some people like to swim outside. I'm not a swimmer personally, but I do like to be outside. So that's the first thing. What I call this in with my own clients, with my field, is if you can't even get outside, just find a space either in your house, in your garden. If you don't have a garden, have a window where you've got plants, or you can create a space in the garden that's just for you. And I call it a medicine spot. And this is something I learned when I did my nature quest in Spain. And it's something I do with the ladies who come to Spain, is you create a space for yourself, whether that be inside or outside in your particular space, your environment, that's your space to be silent, to be in nature. So if it's just with a plant, at a window, it's your space to just be with the plant. Now, this is going to sound potentially a bit woo-woo, but creating a medicine spot for yourself is about being in devotion to you and not the shitty committee, because most people are in devotion to that shit that goes through their head. They're like in that church all day long, right? We want to try and break that pattern. So creating a space for yourself in the morning, whether you're out walking or whether you don't want to walk or you can't walk for whatever reason, and you create a space in your home or your garden, you might just do 2 minutes. And then you might work up to 3 minutes. That's one way that someone can build a relationship to space. And notice, because this is what I noticed when I first did this, is like I wanted to pick up my phone that wasn't there. And that little voice was going, no, 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 pick up the phone. You might miss something important, right? So it's a little bit of a seeing of the voice that's on automatic looping to gain a separation from that. Like it's not you, it's a lower brain that wants you to stay the same. And you're right, so many people live in that sort of logic, logos. They're disconnected from their body. They have no relationship to their body or their nervous system or the nervous system responses. And so then the nervous system has a voice as well. Like, there'll be a certain type of voice that will come into your brain. But just start there. Like, do some sort of face care routine. Make sure you have a shower. Make sure you drink water. Sit in your medicine spot or walk in nature. Without going too complex about these things, I would just start creating space. Just start small and do that for a month. Do that for 2 months. And then, we could do something else. But to do one thing that's different in your routine would take courage, and it would take investment of some other possibility being, aligned for you. And that's difficult for most people, just that one piece. So I'm not going to give you a list of like things, but creating space where you're not reading to fix, you're not walking to fix, you're not exercising to fix, you're doing the thing in nature in some form, whatever form you can do, to create space with only that objective, and then see what unfolds. Because I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is.
That is really a good advice or tip or suggestion. And just leading on from that, I just want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. Is you were saying about trust, and just to sort of get more of an understanding, because trust is something that is breaking. There's no sort of trust in the world at the moment. Yeah, there's this huge amount of distrust going on. I mean, you just have to look at the TV if you've got one, listen to the news, look at politics, look at what's going on. There's this real breakdown of trust. And this is something that I'm personally also learning to deal with. And I'm thinking, and I could be wrong, but I'm thinking that when you were saying here to learn trust is learning to trust in yourself, learning to trust in your own wisdom, your own guidance that you were looking for, and slowly allowing to come out and slowly learning how to listen to it. Can you a little bit explain, how this trust in yourself has helped guide you, has helped you to follow you essentially, and not, what do you call it, the shitty committee and all that? Because I think trust is something that I'm noticing for myself. Is I have massive issues with trust. It's something that I've brought with me. It's some of my baggage, but it's also learning to trust myself, not just others, but learning to trust myself is a process for me. So I'd love to hear your story on this and how it's helped you to get where you are, because going on that advice that you gave about just creating that space of silence, that space, that medicine space, there's going to get confronted by trust and learning to trust yourself. And I think this is something so important.
Yeah, well, it's going to create resistance, and all of your shitty committee is going to come up when things start to become out of the ordinary. But I always find this interesting, this conversation, because why do we trust our shitty committee more than we trust our wisdom? What's that about? Why, if we have a trust issue, we are trusting something, right? So it's about understanding that you have a choice by bringing conscious awareness to what it is you're choosing to trust. Now, I would have said, no, I'm not trusting that shitty committee. No way. But I was, because I believed I wasn't good enough. I believed that whatever stories that were running through me. But like you said, it's part of my baggage, which means it's not new, it's old. And when you face that, where's it come from? What's the core wound underneath that lack of trust? How are you projecting that out there in the world? Because if you're seeing that in politics in the world around you, it's because it lives in you. That's the journey of understanding and being in relationship to. If I have a lack of trust, now I did, and I would have said, my brother's dead, my father's disabled, my husband left me, blah 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 blah, I had loads of evidence to give you, and I wore that like a big badge for many years of why I shouldn't be trusting life. However, facing that in my own self, the stories that were storing through me with some reverence, because there's protective mechanisms in there. There's a reason that, there was a lack of trust, because nobody had ever shown me how to. So I wasn't guided by my parents. I'm not slagging them off at all, because ultimately they were carrying their own stories and their own trauma, right? So they're projecting that onto us. Then we soak that in and then we carry it on. I got into a relationship with that and took responsibility for what was showing up in my life and my part in it. And that's the bit that takes courage. And that's the bit that takes trusting of the process, because we will have a shitty committee telling us all the reasons why we shouldn't do XYZ and why our story is actually true, because the ego likes that fragmentation. Like it needs that to stay like alive. What I did was I became a practitioner in trusting the different story rather than the old story. I practice, like, what if I trusted this wisdom? What if I trusted this nudge? What if I didn't trust the shitty committee? But that's familiar. You love it over there. It takes you right into the swamp where you're familiar. No, I want to try this. Like, there's the resistance, there's the sort of tension it creates in the system. You've got to work out what's running the show to be able to build a relationship to your own self, which in turn leads to trust. Because at the moment, you're trusting one version of a story, which isn't true.
I love that. Thank you. And it's as I've mentioned earlier, it's always good to be reminded of stuff that sometimes we know and the shitty committee just takes over and
Of
but
course,
no, thank you
there'll
for
be a
that.
way. There'll be a way. Like, you could hear the story running through you as you were saying it. You know, like, that's the thing, is if we can press pause. I know we can't often when we're in the flow of something, but if we can press pause and go, hang on a minute, where's the story here? What's storying through me for that to be my reality? Because if we're creating all the time, then there's a co-creational part with life in there. And if we have something sitting in the background, our brain wants to find evidence for that theory. And it will, unless we press pause.
And I think this also comes back to how that medicine space can help with that. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah. But I also wanted to ask you about, you've talked about this rewilding, and it's something, you know, it's nature, and it's I've read a book, I can't think on the top of my head, but this farm in Sussex have rewilded. Is this a similar thing when you talk about rewilding? Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by rewilding and how, you know, what's your experience with it and how it's helped you? And a little bit about what it is, because I think maybe not everybody's heard about what rewilding is, and I'm not sure if what I've read from this farm is the same as what you're talking about. So just explain a little bit about
it kind
rewilding.
of the sort of energy, the theme behind it will be similar. So like, we have a woods here called Ken Hill Woods. They're rewilding at the moment. So it's sort of stripping it back, bringing it back to its natural form. So there's animals in there that live on the wild. They eat from the wild, like there's no processed stuff, right? And bringing things back into alignment with Mother Earth. So in the natural sense, rewilding in the farm will be about bringing it back to its natural state. And that is what I help women, and I work primarily with women. I do have some men clients, but that is what I help humans do, is stripping back from their unnatural processed state, which has been created over many, many, many years. So, you know, I do believe in a relationship with nature. You know, I think that's super important. I think a lot of us are disconnected from the nature of, you know, the seasons of life, the seasons within us, particularly as women. We have cycles. So it's, you know, about building a relationship to your body. And just in essence, it's like, because I don't know if you've read the book Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Have you read that book, you ladies? No. So in that book, she talks a lot about the wild woman, finding that the wild woman archetype. And so what I see as rewilding is finding that place of intuition, finding that place of instinct that's not that's beyond the trauma, that we all experience in some form or another. It's getting to the truth of who you are underneath, again, everything that we've been talking about, the labels, the stories, the unconscious programming. It's living, stripping back. So I don't watch the TV. Now that's one thing that people could potentially do. I make my own food. Lots of my clients grow their own food, but also movement. Are you connected to your body? How in tune with you are you, or are people with their body? Do they eat seasonal foods? But it's more deeply about, those are kind of lovely things. They sound lovely, but if someone's still got unconscious programming running, they're going to eat the chips and crisps and chocolate and cake because they don't have a relationship with their body. They don't understand the language of the body. They may not be moving in a way that serves them. They might be sitting down in one place, stagnant. And if your body's stagnant, your mind will start to stagnate. And there's a whole brilliant bodily system that needs movement, same as thoughts and emotions, and everything is moving. So to rewild yourself is to recalibrate, is to remember who you are, is to be in relationship with your body, with the earth, with what's running the show in the unconscious, a bit like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. We've all got that. We just need to unveil that. It's like stripping yourself bare from all of the conditions and labels and everything that you've put on yourself to be loved. Ultimately, that's why we're doing it. It's to be loved, but we're still looking outside of ourselves. To love yourself is a journey in itself. That's part of the rewilding. So it's the other side of it is having, particularly with the women that I work with, is understanding their feminine nature and the truth of their feminine nature. And, Clarissa talks about this in her book so beautifully, through stories, through myths, and having that connection to that inner wisdom, inner voice. I mean, she has a different form around it, but essentially it's your intuitive sense, your intuition, and being protective of your yin. And a lot of women work too hard and think too hard and are in their logos and not in their body, and they don't know how to receive. There's so many places I could, but the threads of all of it are being connected to something outside of your belief. That's rewilding to me. Remembering who you are, recalibrating with that, tuning into that, attuning to your own needs. And maybe walk barefoot on the ground if you can.
Oh, I love walking barefoot on the ground. And we used to have dogs, but we don't anymore. But since then, I can go outside, and I just love hanging the washing up and just my feet in the grass. That is about one of the few advantages to not having dogs, is your grass is clean. But I love it, and it's helped me to deal with the loss of our dogs, and just knowing that I can now go outside and just hang up my laundry in with barefoot in the morning, and the dew on the grass and everything. And I love it. I'm constantly barefoot. I'm South African. I think I only wore shoes when I first came to the UK, so barefoot is second nature to me. But I get the barefoot, so thank you.
Yeah, no, that's all right. And like going back to like strategies, I had one of my clients tell me last night she'd bought herself some beautiful underwear. Now, this is going to sound, again, very simplistic to someone, but to have nice clothes on your skin is something that brings about a kind of, yeah, I'm worth this nice material on my skin. It doesn't matter if it's a bra or knickers or a shirt or trousers, but it's taking care of yourself in a way that matters. You know, I don't know for how many years I wore the same bra. I mean, my boobs must have gone up and down so many sizes, and I never changed the bra. It was the same. There's things like that that you wouldn't even necessarily know because you're so busy going, you know, I'm shit, I'm shit, I'm shit, I'm shit. I'm so pleased you walk barefoot. I love walking on the beach here in barefoot, no matter the weather. You know, there's so many benefits to that, so many places you could go with that. But if you just do that and be open to a different possibility for yourself, it can sow a seed of something different. And that's all that happened to me. I'm no different to anyone else. Life just invited me and I listened.
And I'm sure that our listeners have gotten so much from this. And as you say, it is about listening. And you've given so many wonderful nuggets to think about and to let in and see how it makes us feel and what we want to do with that. But we always want a little bit more in our podcast. So as we're drawing to the close, I would still ask for your final words of wisdom. Is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners? Something that we either haven't asked about and you think that this is something that definitely needs to be said, or it's something that we talked about and you just want to really drill down and really like make a point about a statement or an idea that you shared here with us. This is your place to, you know, leave our listeners with one last gold nugget.
To open up to the possibility that you are worthy, to open up to the possibility that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you, that you are not broken and you don't need fixing. And if you can hear that, just the thread of that, and have some courage and touch that courage and touch that heart place within you that can take the nudge that's been calling you, because it will have been calling you quietly, trust it, because it won't go wrong because there's nothing wrong with you. And that's the truth.
That's so beautiful, so powerful. Thank you so much, Charlie, for being here, for taking this time to chat with us. I know that we could talk for another hour, two, three, and go into different directions and explore different aspects of your journey, your experience, your wisdom. But I think we've given our listeners a good sense of, you know, what you've been through and what wisdom you draw from there. So if anyone listening has the feeling that they want a bit more, that they want to know more, where they can find you online, where they can connect with you. Tell us about your podcast so we can then send people your way.
Okay, thank you. My website is probably the best place to get hold of me because it's I am Charli Wall and it's CHARLI Wall WALL. And all of my my Facebook groups, my YouTube channel, my podcast. My podcast is called Courage Dear Heart. If you don't want to go to my website, and that's on all of the podcast platforms. I really believe in people, and I really believe in their courage, and I have faith in them. So yeah, they can find me in those places.
Wonderful. And obviously, I have all your links and everything. And it will be in the footnotes of the episode so people can just find you through there and go directly to wherever. But it's always lovely to know where you're really waiting for people to meet you online. Thank you so much, Charlie, for being here, for sharing so openly and taking us on this wonderful, wild journey with you.
It's been a pleasure, and it's really lovely to meet you, and so lovely to see you again, Lenka, as well. It's been an honor. Thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, as always, we ask you, what did you get from today's episode? What was the one thing that stood out to you in any way? Whatever Charli said, whatever questions we've asked, whatever your knowing was telling you. If you feel comfortable sharing, we would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment wherever you find us online. And until next time, thank you so much. See you soon. Bye.
If you enjoyed listening to our conversation, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe. We would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and write a short review.